even on the local stage, what we end up seeing is sometimes there is actual confusion. And the first topic we're going to be talking about today is actually bred in that confusion. Proposition confusion. There are two propositions on the statewide ballot that have people, I don't want to say completely mystified, but
that's probably pretty accurate.
There's some line blending that I think is a little misdirected. So proposition number 1 calls for a constitutional convention.
Right.
Proposition number 2 allows judges to revoke or reduce the pension of public officers convicted of a felony related to his or her duties.
Yes.
Am I summing that up correctly?
Yep.
So what we have here is the reaction to it. We ran a story a couple weeks ago now about number 2, the second proposition there, where those who have been found corrupt would lose their pensions.
Right.
We're finding that a lot of the readers were actually confused and thought that this was somehow connected to the narrative that pensions are going to be eliminated or reduced or significantly cut if there is a constitutional convention.
Yes.
No, not the same thing.
Right, the two are separate
completely different things.
And it's very interesting because the actual proposition on the ballot for the Constitutional Convention, which is like the big ticket, complicated, multi-tiered process, this vote is just the first vote. Then you would actually next year have to select who are the delegates. Then after that, you would have to review their amendments and determine whether or not you actually want to revise the Constitution, the state constitution. That just reads, shall there be a convention to revise the Constitution and amend the same? Yes or no? Well, I think the actual wording is very bad because it couples having the convention and actually amending the Constitution as the same thing. And initially, I was supportive of the idea of a constitutional convention because I think there are a lot of things that are antiquated about our Constitution, that are overly wordy, that don't reflect the reality of what our current values are. So I liked the idea. But when you think more about it and what's at stake and how this unbridled campaign finance nonsense that we keep talking about but still can't get changed could actually affect that system, now I actually think it's a fairly scary proposition to have a constitutional convention under the parameters that are given right now. But then the fact that the actual proposition says and amend doesn't make clear that there is a separate vote to amend the Constitution. So I think it gives people the idea that this is the whole kit and caboodle right up front, which it's not, but it's just poorly worded. So I don't know who thought, let's take this really complicated issue and make it one kind of ambiguous sentence, whereas all the other propositions are like a paragraph.
Right.
So that, that leaves me a little leery about that. I have more to say about the Constitutional Convention issue if that's what we're going to talk about. But on the face of it, just at first, I think the ballot proposition doesn't help the cause at all.
To me, and this is just my own, from reading some of the stories, from listening to what some people have said, it seems really presumptive to me that people are already, and I guess this, given the ambiguity that you're talking about in the wording itself, is, I mean, you can understand that people's expectations go there, but it really seems to be painted like this doomsday scenario for, oh no, this vote happens and almost as if immediately pensions are going to be cut.
Right.
And it's a really long and hefty process, and it's really hard to actually have the process even happen in the first place. It's not something like New York is not going to drastically change overnight just because this proposition is either passed or does not pass.
Right.
And I think that's kind of what people have to keep in mind. And just on the corruption side, connected to number 2, this is something that has been, I'll say, spouted off by a lot of people for a long time. Politicians are corrupt. We need to clean politics up. We need to not allow these people to get away with crimes and
right.
you know,
right,
and
build their career on.
to now activity. Just without doing an extensive amount of research. And this is on the voter, in my opinion, because the voter needs to do what they have to do to be informed when they're going out to vote. Don't just go by the sign that you see alongside the road. Don't just go by the mailer that comes to your house addressed to you. Do your own research about these issues. Actually look into these issues. And truthfully, number 2 is one that we've really needed for a long time, and to have a concrete, this is how this will be handled moving forward, would be a really good, wholesome step for New York State to finally get hammered out.
Well, and I would just remind people that during the last state Senate races, this was a huge issue. The need to be able to strip the pensions of, at the time, Sheldon Silver and how am I forgetting his name?
We've been unconvicted. It doesn't even matter.
Dean Skelos. Sorry.
They've been unconvicted.
But yeah, but remember, that was a lot of the discussion, and people were saying, yes, I mean, if you, if you're convicted of corruption, you should forfeit your pension. And then other people were pointing out, right, but currently that's not allowed under the state system. That has to be amended. So absolutely, proposition number 2 makes sense, is needed. I mean, it's a small step. It's not going to prevent corruption completely, but at least maybe it would make some of these people think twice before they do engage in this kind of activity, that if they're thinking that they're just going to be able to resign their seat or retire and disappear into obscurity and collect their pension after having done this to the taxpayers of the state, at least maybe that would cause them to think twice a little bit. But I think, yeah, absolutely, proposition number 2 should be supported, and I hope it passes because it's needed. It's definitely needed.
And it is definitely not a silver bullet by any means.
Right.
There are a million things that need to be done. This is just a very nice first step.
Yeah.
And moving forward, I think one of the topics that we'll end up going into down the road on this podcast is actually the discussion around New York State and teachers and the strength of some of the unions and how this whole how we've gotten to this point where people are very defensive of their pensions, what few pensions actually exist today. But that's not what